Okay. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the live Q&A that we have today. Hopefully the stream is working perfectly fine. And I have two systems of streaming here in the Discord. So today we're currently here connected with Andromeda, Arnell, Citrus. Nice to see you back. Doig Song. Lech, great to have you here again as well. Marty as well, happy to see you. Pyramid Scheme, Slink, and Yush. So I'm glad to see you guys, the familiar faces, and also some new ones today. And we're going to explore an interesting topic which has a lot to do with shader nodes and painterly techniques in kind of an unorthodox way. Since we don't have any pre-programmed questions, today is more of a technical exploration and explanation as I work on a short film as a music video for next March 2022. So it is a music video that economizes on animation, but hopefully we hit more of a comic book painterly kind of style. Not quite a traditional comic book, but more like a oil-based painting instead. My internet cut. Hello, sorry about that. Yeah, my internet cut for a moment. Can you guys hear me again? Dropped out, sorry, my Discord has dropped out. Am I having problems connecting? Okay, can you guys see me now? Hear me now?
Yes.
Maybe.
And is the stream still working?
Yes.
Cool. Sorry about that, my Discord just decided to disconnect me for a moment. That was fun.
Ah yes, Discord decided to die.
Yeah, it decided to die. It was like,
Yeah.
I'm dead today.
Happens to me.
Yeah, it's been unstable lately, I'm not sure why. If anything, this will be recorded onto YouTube, so if anything's lost. But what was the last thing I said? I don't remember. I think I was talking about the unorthodox system of painterly, of what I'm going to explore today. So first things first, I'm going to first focus on using a texture with an alpha clip on paint edges for a mesh using Fresnel. So what do you guys know about Fresnel? What is it? Or is it Fresnel?
It is called Fernal.
Fernal?
But Fernel. It's French. Fernel.
Fresnel.
But I like Fresnel.
Fresnel, yeah.
The good German way, Fresnel.
Fresnel.
It's
like
Fresnel.
Fresnel?
Shut up. Nerd.
So what does it mean? What is it good for?
It shows you the angle a face is pointing to you with color from black to white.
Okay, great. That's kind of handy.
And it's normally used for reflection, like the more angle you have, the more reflective you have, the more straight you look at it, the less reflective it is.
All right, that's good.
It is also a thing that appears in the real world. Like if you look for it, you see it, and then you go crazy, like me. And yeah.
All right. Okay, so I've just opened up one of my scenes, and what we're going to do is we're going to use Fresnel. Can't say it now. Fresnel.
Fresnel.
We're going to use Fresnel
Fresnel.
to create edges around geometry, specifically rounded geometry, to create the effect that we need. But I'm getting a visual glitch for some reason. Or what? Double check. World. Okay, it's my scene world. Okay, that's. So, if you mentioned a couple classes ago, we had a concept of this painterly effect that we have here, where the paint strokes change their size when I zoom in, so that I have a little bit more coherent shapes between the pieces. And I've been using a logarithm with the view zeta depth here to drive the depth using a floor. So I subtract a certain amount, I like to offset it, so I have 2 of them. So I floor it, and I use the power of 2 and divide by 2 to drive the scale of my UVs onto the textures that I'm working with. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to recreate a painterly effect from a couple of images that I have here in this project. The key image that I'm trying to work on is of Hulk. He's a great guy. Let's go to my style folder. Here it is. The artist that I have is Ralph Bakshi and Bill Sienkiewicz. The Bill Sienkiewicz has a really interesting art style that I like. If I remember correctly, he painted this particular Hulk. I don't know where. But if we take a closer look, this is another image that he created, which is another one of my references, is this effect. So we can see that the canvas has a very fine, like spray painted texture and brushstrokes, kind of like an airbrush, but at the same time, we also have this penciled in or penned in or ink pen outlines. We also have kind of like this bleed of watercolor paintings or oil-based painting, which bleeds out the color shape, the different colors. And then we also have these splatters and spots all over the place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a typical scene with a hero asset, and then I'm going to start working the pieces to try recreate this concept. So first things first, we need a hero asset. Let's go in here, make a new scene, call this my look dev scene, and we'll just quickly make the hero asset. What do you guys want? Do you want like a vase and a plate or something? What else should we do? Table?
Make the Hulk.
That's going to be a bit too much to do in 1 hour. I could like download a couple.
You model the whole T-Rex in 45 minutes and then VR.
But that was the whole 45 minutes.
Yeah. Don't tell me that you can model the Hulk under an hour.
My sculpting's not that bad. I'll import like a basic character, and I'll use this character as like my reference, a semi-cartoonish character. And I'll use this character, I guess kind of like this, really. Maybe I'll like put like a piece of furniture behind her. Turn off tweak. I really don't like it on tweak. So, this furniture could be kind of like
Furniture, also known as the default cube.
yeah. I have to be quick, but I need something that's going to be like relevant to the world, I guess, that we're going to work in, so that we have some context of how I want to make the piece of art. So here she is. She's divided up as a piece like this. Stand there, down a bit. Kind of sci-fi-ish. Okay, so now we do the fun part where we go to items. We just give it trusty bevel. Maybe bring out our own piece up here. Quickly like this. Get a bit more stylized, so pop that out a bit. And then we go the fun sculpting part to bring out the style that I want. So let's actually probably localize her. Go back into my collection. The screen here, as you can see. Let me zoom in. On my other screen, I have like these 3 collections that I use. So I usually keep open on my other screen, or 3 outliners, like controlling my collection so that I can link into scene nice and easily. Boom. So that I have the full collection available instead of using the instance. But now it's like a different system that I use for that. So now that she's available, I guess I can now like position to cursor and just quickly pose her into a position. This. Now she can like kind of sit down. I could sculpt her into pose, but we're running out of time just a little bit. Yeah, we'll just keep it like that for now. Kind of like the image that we saw. Kind of. We only need just a little bit of context just to get the art style. There we go. Throw on a bit onto here as well. Double the edges. And this is going to be ground zero, basically. Okay, so next things, we need to start thinking about the Fernell painterly effect on the character. So to do that, go to shading, grab the piece, and we start working on the Fernell. So we also need some paint texture strokes. So let's go back to our references. And we'll take a look at the type of brushes that this character or this artist is using, just to get a general idea of what type of brush strokes do we need. Because I'm not going to procedurally make these brush strokes the whole time. I'm going to try and make them partly rastered, partly based off other people's work, so that we have some idea. So if we take a closer look at these pictures here, so let's zoom in just a tiny bit, we can see a little bit of the brush strokes that's happening here, a little bit of scratchiness, a little bit of like brush strokes over the other that's like semi-transparent. We got these drawn in white, like this oil, I guess you could say. This white effect is kind of nice. Here, this one has the most amount, like the canvas paint that we have, kind of, this is oil based, I suppose. I still haven't decided if I'm using water based or oil based or acrylic, not sure yet. I'm just getting the vibe. But I like this vibe a lot. So, those are the brush strokes that we need. There's not a lot of texture, but it's kind of globular. There's the airbrush technique that I showed you earlier, which is the one that I might work the most because it seems to be relatively easy and still looks great. Then we have the mixture of the pencil strokes with the airbrush. Then we have the mixed medium here. I love this. And I like the energy that he puts into the canvas. And here's my Hulk that I have as a reference. So we've got all these little brush textures all over the place. So what we can do now is also we got to think about the edges of the character. As you can see, the edges of the character sometimes breaks up. This is what we're trying to do. The edges of the character needs to break up just a little bit to get that effect. So these are the subtle things that we need. Same with here. This edge of this character, we have line art, great. But now we need to like break out the color a little bit so that the edges of the character breaks out with the background ever so slightly in the geometry. So let's go back, create a new material. I'm going to call this the Fernell edge breakup. And what I'm going to do is just make it nice and fast to compile. So we're just going to use a diffuse shader, which is a little bit faster to compile. And just throw on a Fernell. First things first, the Fernell we're going to also mix into a transparent node, BSDF, using the mix shader node. And now that we have the mix in here, good. So now we have the mix in here, we've got the Fernell as a color so we can see what's happening. And it's currently like this, and we can throw into the color here, and then we can use a, whoops. There we go. And then we throw in something called a map range node. to kind of exaggerate the effect. So I'm going to get in a couple of other objects as well. So for example, a typical sphere. And I'm also going to throw a typical torus. And what else? Another cube. And maybe that's about it, really. Okay, so I'll just copy the material. And we're good. Go back to here. So there's the Fresnel. All working perfectly fine. But it's not breaking up on the edges. So, guys, I have a question for you. What would you do to break up the edges of the Fresnel? Any question? Any idea? By the vegan teacher.
Distort it with noise texture.
Noise texture. We want to make it kind of like a brush, right? A brush noise that we saw from the reference here, right? So I'm going to take a look at these textures that I have categorized and downloaded CCO from the internet. It's great to use CCO because then you don't have to worry about crediting anyone and using them freely. Just wait for the thumbnails to finish. But I'm going to use one of these to break the edges. So this is very similar to the technique that I have. I don't have to worry about it. The good thing about using raster images instead of noise nodes is performance to some degree. So what I'm going to do is also, I have to project these based on the camera and work them into the texture of what I need. So I quite like, I'm going to use a pretty generic noise. Which one will it be? This one.
Sorry.
Yes.
What is raster images?
Okay, the difference between procedural and raster, or vector and raster is basically made out of pixels. So if you zoom in, it gets blurrier and blurrier and blurrier because each little thing is a pixel, right?
Oh, so it's like PNG, JPEG.
Exactly. PNG,
thing.
JPEG, bitmap, Targa, TIFF, even EXRs. All of these are raster images.
So basically like PBR, it's like raster.
Exactly. The PBR
Oh,
workflow
okay.
uses raster images. So anything that restores pixels inside of an image with a set definition and size is a raster. And anything that is procedural concerning algorithms and vector art and things like that, all of those are not raster, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use one of these just for performance reasons, but first things first, I need to make sure that it tiles. There was one of the early ones. Cool. This one. I'm going to load this up into Krita. These images are quite big because it has quite a lot of detail. So now I'm going to just resize the canvas to make it square. Okay, so now we're good at square. I'm also going to resize it so that it fits onto the GPU in a better way. So scale image to new size. Right now it's 1668, which means it's going to take 2 slots of 1024, but not completely. So what I want to do is I want to fill up the slots of my GPU card to 2048. That's why we use divisible by 2. Or divisible into bits, sorry, by 8, I think it is. So now that is a texture size that will be a lot more performant. And I've got to make sure it mirrors. So first things first, I'll just do a, where is it, view? Wraparound mode. And as you can see, it doesn't tile at all. So I get my trusty and useful clone brush. Brush presets, clone. Make it relatively big. Control click anywhere and whip out my pen tablet just for fun. And start painting in some things. Like randomize the placement every now and then and just fill in, paint over the edges here so that it becomes a little bit more tileable. texture I wanted a bit more. Zoom out. Kind of break it up a bit. Yeah, a little bit better. And we can use two of these same textures with different like phasing, I guess you could say, to even hide the tile a bit more, or even using what's it called? Texture bombing. And we can bomb this texture to kind of break up the tiling as well. But we can do that later. So save this as a new texture.
Just one question.
Yes.
As far as I know, Blender doesn't have a native thing to bomb some textures.
There are a lot of good free add-ons for this.
Yes. Okay.
So let me get one. Okay, so that's saved. Save as a PNG, as in. Oh, okay, good. What did I save it as? PNG? Yep. Okay, good. So let's go back here, and we're going to bring out the texture. Or to throw in an image texture. Open up that one that we had. The project, pictures, textures, and then go back into my texture that I'm using, look that up. As you can see, it looks weird right now. If we plug it in, as you can see, its projections are equitriangular, but I don't want it that way. Oh, that's because it's a background image. I want texture. Better. So now if we look into it, we can see that the textures look okay on things that have UVs, but if we look on this chair, it looks pretty bad, right? So it doesn't look good here. So what do we do about this?
You don't use UV.
That's right. So what should we use?
I just thought of like UV unwrapping it.
Okay, well, we can't use UVs right now. So what I'm going to
What
do...
if we use window coordinates?
Yeah, good idea. So let's jump into the camera. So we have a camera as a reference. So we can see how things look from the camera. And now we can like start working on the projection from the camera. So let's go back to our shading nodes and grab this material. And what we want is we want texture coordinates. And we want some mapping as well. So go back to my vectors, grab a mapping node. And I can use my camera. Throw that in. Let that compile again. And now we have a swimming texture. Great. So if we full screen it, as you can see, everything is floating and attached to the view of the camera. It doesn't scale to the camera. Well, does it? Nope, it doesn't scale to the camera. So this is where I need to like think of my system that I created to scale to the camera by distance so that this becomes coherent. So I have a node and node groups. Grab it. Node groups, coherent scale. I will use this coherent scale into two textures with a mix node. So I just made, basically what I did is I just saved myself a bunch of time and made this node group, which what it does is what I showed you earlier today, where it takes the logarithm and the faction and the floor and the power and divides and then scales the two textures onto each other and then blends them together with a linear gradient. And it works that way. Though this one is an older version, but it will have to do for now because we don't have a lot of time. So now let's get in mix RGB node, throw in the two materials and use the factor of my coherent scale, which runs two textures. And now it's working. Oh, that's because I'm texture 1, texture 2. Sorry, they're two different normals. Working. Oh, that's because I'm using the wrong UV or not? Okay, maybe need to grab another material. Just let me take a look. All save. Coherent distribution strokes. This was an experiment. Not the one I'm looking for though. Pre-process is not the one I'm looking for. Distance material. A good one. This is the one I'm looking for. So let's pack this up a bit. Get it working correctly. So all of this is not necessary. Clean the tree up. Step logarithm. This is the texture coordinates based on generated and UV. So I have a mixture of two. You have to split it up even more. This is the group that I... So we've got... Whoops. Coming in from the bottom here. Alright, so let me explain to you how this works, basically. So what I do is, first things first, you got the zeta depth, and then you get the logarithm of the zeta depth. This gives me kind of like this stepped concept of what the zeta depth does. And then from there, I grab it, I floor it. And I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the session, then I, JK made this system actually. JC did the system earlier. So I have to pack this up into a node so I can give it to you guys later. But with the system, now I can have two textures that are blended together using this group node. So let me just see if I can copy these nodes so that I can use them later into my depth. And then we'll go to my Fresnel node. We'll paste it here. So now we have the same group that we have here, but just broken up to two. So move that in. Move this in. Move that into the factor. Now we can preview the material. There it is. Check to see if it's working. Okay, yeah, it's working now. As you can see, the material is fading between the two. That's great, but we still don't have we have to change the projection just a little bit onto the texture so that instead of being UV, it is generated to camera. So now we have it scaling to camera correctly with double waves. As you can see, this version doesn't have the soft edges onto the on the system, and at perpendicular angles kind of looks distorted to some degree, and that's a problem that I'm trying to fix right now. So as you can see on the cube, if I go full screen and look at the cube and rotate around it, you can start to see things start distorting in a strange way, and there's a sharp angle on the blend. So that blend I fixed in another file, but we're not going to focus on that today. We're just going to focus on the Fresnel to break up the edges so that the sharp edges of this texture or around the Fresnel doesn't look so terrible. Okay, cool. So now we got that sorted. Next step is the actual texture of the Fresnel. So you guys mentioned the Fresnel should have a texture, right? And this is the texture. So what we can do now is we can use a mix RGB. And we can use linear light. I think it's linear light, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Zoom in. Alright, let's see if I'm doing this right. So now we have this edge, right? We can make it bigger or smaller. Okay, so what do you guys think? Should we use linear light or something else?
Linear light is the answer to all questions, except for those that it creates. I go with the linear light. It seems to be the right thing.
I think I may need to swap it over there. There we go. So now we've got an edge. Alright, so starting to break up the edge ever so slightly. And we know that we're clamping the values. So if we look at the sphere here, whatever is white is going to be transparent and whatever is black is going to be solid. But we want to just break up the edge just a little bit by linear lighting or clamping onto linear light onto the edges here. So as you can see, we've got camera space that's scaling to the distance of the camera and breaking up the edges here. So now, if we go into our transparency and go to our object material options, we got to make sure that the blend mode is alpha clip. And we go into the shader. I'm doing the add shader, so we should probably do a mix. Go into my input, change it to mix, and mix in the one over the other. Transparent, I'm going to change the color to just white, and I'm going to use the actual texture of the material as the factor between the blending of mixing of the diffuse and the transparency. So now it's inverted. Yay. So let's just swap them around. So we got transparency and diffuse, and we're looking at the clip here. It's working on one area of the object, but not on the sphere too well. So let's just check and
Is
see.
the cube smooth shaded?
It is apparently. There it is.
But yeah. No, it works.
And let's take a closer look, and we'll take a look at the clip threshold. It's working. So we can up the clip threshold even more or less, or just keep it at 0.5. And then we can tune it inside the material here with my range. So just see. Alright. It's still not very noisy, is it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply or math it. So I'm going to multiply the actual material by a chunk, by maybe 2. So that it becomes a bit, there we go. Coming on. So let's zoom in. So as you can see now, we have a thrown out and we zoom out. Texture is scaling to the view and it's working on some things. It's great. Except for this cube, which has sharp edges here. So a rule of modeling is what I think, well, something I need to keep in mind is that when I have my models, I need to make sure that they are smooth shaded and that they have backface culling turned off. So let's go back to my material, backface culling, and I turn it off. And now my object's facing the camera. I can't see behind it, but I see a general shape of a cube based on the Fresnel, which is kind of strong right now. If we take a look at this chair, the colors are not quite how I want them to be, but it is something that I can use. So this could be useful for one thing, and I can use this to drive other things. So that's part of the answer. So let's take a look at the next topic of today. And Blender on a browser. How XSOC, no mic XSOC. Okay, so the next topic that we have is that we use the Fresnel with an alpha clip to paint edges on a mesh using a texture. So now we're going to take a look at like painting actual brush strokes using a flow map. So this is something curious because when you look at digital painterly, it often goes into a concept that looks a lot like pointillism, or you know those paintings where you have like hundreds of thousands of tiny little brushstrokes and none of them are like long brushstrokes. That kind of looks great.
Or like a few thousand dots.
Exactly, a few thousand dots just to make your picture. A brush, pixels. They're just pretty much like using paint as pixels. Oh, and by the way, if you guys want to like do some texture bashing, there's an add-on called Anti-Seam. You just click on a texture and click on Anti-Seam, and it will make it.
And seam no more.
And it removes. We'll do it on the other texture as well. It will remove your tiling as to some degree. So this is a smaller one. We're going to shift. There we go. As you can see, you can kind of break up the edges a little bit. Shift things around just a tiny bit. There you go. So now the textures are less. It's still repeating to some degree. But it is making it a lot less performant, let me tell you that. Okay, cool. And I guess if I want to change the scale, it will do it here in the mapping node. So Control H. We can just scale to whatever one I want, so it's bigger. Okay, so we've broken up the edges of our paint. This. And now we need brush strokes to some degree. How do we do brush strokes? So for example, this is my alpha. I'm going to make my diffuse flat. This. Now my diffuse is flat. What do I do? How do I paint this in? And also, let's just bring back my Ronel a tiny bit, so a bit more shape before we break up the shape. Now we need to think of the diffuse. So, we got this diffuse color with a little bit of alpha, but we need some brush strokes onto here. So, do you guys know what a flow map is?
Kinda.
Okay,
Like
well,
it's a map. It's a map of, I think, yeah, of RGB colors like X, Y, Z, and it just describes in which flow it goes.
right. So I'm going to save the scene, coherence number 6, and I'm going to load up another scene which I have saved in my library. Hide my materials, utility. Here I'm going to look for flow map. Where is it? Is it?
It is gone.
Hey, where's my flow map? Or maybe I have it in the other. Bear with me 1 second. Study. Element is concept. Okay, we're going to have to re-download it from the internet because somebody else has already created a system. So we're just going to use that. So we're going to go to Gumroad. I think under pressure, I don't remember things so well. What? What's wrong with my internet? There it is. Still loading. Here it is. Okay, so we'll go look for flow map. I'll link you guys this. Flow map painter for Blender by Clemens Butte. Highly recommend this. We can just download the examples. So slow.
But it is an add-on. It is an add-on, so to use it, you need to install the add-on.
The add-on helps you create the node groups, but it is here already.
No, you need to paint. The add-on helps also to paint the flow map. Like, how the fuck do you paint the flow map with
True, yeah.
just like, yeah, I put now R there, and now I paint here blue. No,
No, and
just
then you
let the
paint it
add-on do its thing.
green. Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah, just let the add-on do its thing.
you're right. I had completely forgot. It's been a while. So basically, what I'm gonna do is the flow maps are typically used for animation in games where you make a texture loop upon itself and flow around. You know, kind of like those dreamy gifs that you see of like a waterfall or something. So when you look at like a flow map, it takes the XY values of a UV map with some colors to define the speed, which is the intensity of the color, and the direction, which is the type of color of how things should flow. So if I press play here, right, as you can see on like this character here, you can see the texture is moving on itself, which is kind of cool. Whoops, here it is. If I take a look at the monkey and Suzanne, you can see the texture on the eyes. It's kind of like creepy crawling, moving around on top of each other. And that's the effect. You could do the same with other textures, like with the water. So you have this water effect, and you can start painting a flow map on the water so that it can move around. So I'm going to change it to... And the cool thing is you can also use this to orientate the orientation of the strokes that you want. So if I go into this texture here, I go into texture paint mode, I have the flow map add-on already installed, and I can go into a mode and paint in the direction of the strokes. So for example here, it doesn't work together, so I turn it on. I start painting in the material that I want to put into it. So, okay. Material do we have installed it? We're setting drawing rate, text paint, painting the flow map, which is gray. So it should not be gray. There we go. So as you can see, when you're painting, it creates like downwards is red, upwards is light green, to the right is orange, and to the left is green. So, and how fast I do it or not changes the intensity of these shapes. So now that I have a flow map, go back into my rendering here, it starts changing how things move or how I orientate texture along the actual character. If I press play, as you can see, is changing the direction of everything. So I can use this to kind of like create the orientation of strokes or the flow of the map. It's kind of interesting. Especially if you like want to paint. Well, I should turn this on. So now if I turn it on, paint in 3D or here. There we go. It changes how it works. Turn that up. So that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to like extract this and use this to paint my other strokes. So let's take a look at the nodes. See how does it work. The first things first, we have texture coordinates from the flow map, which is the texture, and then it's multiplied and then added negatively upon itself and driven into a flow map rotation of the tiles. Now if we take a look at these values, scaling the texture coordinate UVs by a certain amount. If I take a look, like it makes it bigger or smaller. Okay, cool. We have this value which is driving the rotation of the tile, so I can rotation 0, so that there is no rotation, but no. So that's kind of like a subtexture of a kind. And then this, we have the UV of the first grid, UV of the second grid, and an offset. And then we have the grid blend of the first one and the final blend of the second one. So to rebuild this, we're going to need two textures, one on top of the other, mixed into each other, and then another two on top of each other, mixed into another one on the bottom. So that's one way of doing it. He also does the same with the normals. And then they drive the power of the PBR. And okay, so let's take a closer look. Let's zoom into this. So here we have from the top, got the first grid. We can basically take a look at this nice and quickly. And it's working by taking in the UV and dividing it by 1 and 2, and then it combines onto the XY axis. Interesting. This snap one is probably what's doing the trick. But when it snaps, it goes to one value, it goes back to the other value. Boop. Does like a loop. Boop. So every time I move something, it will go back to the other thing. So this is the rotation. Where's the animation part? Anyway, don't have enough time to take a look at it and explain it to you guys, but I hope it's interesting so far. So here we have the XYZ, which controls the flow. And that's basically it. So it's a bit too complex, so I need to find a simpler version of this material, which is this one here. So here's the simplest version of the material, and this is what we're going to use. We're going to just take a look at the color. And we'll take a look at the simplest version. So here we have the flow map, which inverts into the value, and then it multiplies and goes into the UV distorted with the normal UV, this material here. It's gonna take too long to do in this hour. So guys, well, I guess we're nearing the hour, and I'm not actually prepared to do the flow map part. So I guess I can finish today with opening up the mic and finishing up my textures for the rest of the painting that we have here, just preparing my assets. So do you guys have questions about the Fernel, or do you guys have any extra ideas to add to that? How would you guys do like better Fernel on flat angles? The waterfall, there we go. Marty, you're going to open the mic?
Yeah, but I just had a smart ass remark to make, so I decided to think better of it.
It's all good.
I looked up pronunciations of Fresnel.
Yeah.
I found that there are 13 different pronunciations in common use in English.
13.
I can only think of 3.
Wow. How do you pronounce 13 of them?
There's a YouTube that goes through it, but I didn't want to watch it.
Interesting. Texture core. Really need to learn this a lot more to make it work and make it easier, because I don't need the animation part. I need the flow part. of the text. Park text. Kind of does like per channel. Yellow, green. It's just repeated 3 times. RG. One takes. RG as well. Curious. Go back to the front. Well, guys, I guess I'll end the stream here. That's as much as I've managed to prepare for today. The rest is kind of like a silent exploration. It could take hours. So I won't take much more of your time. For now, next week hopefully I have a bit more answers and things to show concerning this flow map painting technique. The other topics that I have lined up. One of them was how to create preprocessed refraction, which is something I talked about earlier. And another thing which I wanted to try out was using geometry nodes or particles for extra oomph. But to do that first, I need to prepare my brush strokes, which I'm just using Krita and CCO textures to do first. But once I have my brush strokes style that I need, then I just create the system. So, thanks for hanging out till the end. Thanks for connecting and paying attention. Just link you guys this add-on for the flow maps, and we'll see what we can do with it next week.
Thanks, Trace. Always a good time.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the very stressful nodes. Jeez. Wow. Like, I thought I was doing stuff with nodes. That's like next level.
Yeah, well, the camera depth thing has been an ongoing project for a while. And this flow map is something that I still don't quite understand 100%. But thanks to you guys of the community, I managed to get the camera depth okay.
I just use Houdini to make flow maps.
So this painter, the flow map painter, is actually very good for making it. It's just interpreting the flow map and making them useful in the shader is the next step. Because the painter is really nice. You just use your texture painting and you're good.
I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, and then compared to Houdini, it's free.
Yeah, there's a free version of Houdini too.
Yeah,
No.
but you have a
No.
lot of restrictions, right?
Yeah, it's got a shit ton of restrictions. But like, if you're using it for stuff to bring into another program, it's actually not that bad. But if you're specifically trying to get stuff out of Houdini, then yeah, it's not the way to go.
Way to go. Gotcha. I do like the power of Houdini.
And
though.
also, the nodes don't make a sense. The nodes are an absolute joke. Like,
Houdini?
I can't go through one project. Yeah, I can't go through one project without having to look up a YouTube tutorial or go to the website to look at stuff. It's intense.
Really? So you kind of have to like walk through everything. Really?
I'm still like obviously like learning, but like it's a lot. I feel like it's a lot harder than it should be, or at least it's a lot harder than every other program I've tried to learn.
Yeah, that's why I've kind of haven't, like, I started learning ice in Soft Image, which I pretty great, but then it died. But then I had a quick look at Houdini, and I watched a tutorial, and almost all the tutorials I saw started using some code to script in extra functionality to the nodes. Like, hang on a minute, this isn't very user-friendly. Not what I wanted.
Yep, that's exactly how it goes.
Yeah, so,
Literally, that's exactly how it goes.
yeah, so I was like, that's not what I wanted. So I was kind of
Like one of the guys that I work with, he's like a Houdini expert. He literally has like scripts on scripts on scripts that he's made on his own to actually use the software.
User friendly intensifies.
user-friendly intensive.
It's definitely it's not for. I think it's when I look at Houdini, I'm like it's like if that's what you do, then it makes sense. But it's not like an extra program. It's not a program you're gonna pick up. Like I use like Marvelous Designer for cloth simulations or whatever. That's easy to learn. Houdini is not in that category. You're gonna have to put aside everything else that you currently use just to focus on learning how to actually use it.
Man. But it is TD's useful tool, no? Like for a technical director, making tools for tools or production, the way to go, right? I think that's his forte, no?
Houdini's profile is like it's like very procedural, like procedural. Like everything there you make is procedural. So
Yeah.
like you made like a thing and then like the directors make it one guy less in this crowd simulation. You're like, what the fuck? Why? Okay. Then you just and then you just like delete this. No, you don't delete. You just change the numbers. Then you resimulate and boom, done.
Yeah, once you have like the workflow down, it becomes like a whole lot easier. But it's getting to that stage where somebody could be like, just make this random change in this, like let's say there's like an explosion. Make it so the building emits less particles. That takes like, you need to first know how to set everything up procedurally, and then you can start doing the adjustments. And I've seen some of like the nodes that like some of my friends use for it. It's absolutely ridiculous. You have like a node tree with like everything goes into like one scene, one setup. So when they open it, it opens up into multiple scenes beneath that. One handling the objects, one's handling the physics, one's handling everything. It's amazing. It's like the thing that makes me laugh is that they say they want to do the same thing with geometry nodes, and I'm like, it's gonna take so long, and and where it is now, it's like nowhere near even just getting into the basics of Houdini. Like the options you have for nodes in Houdini are insane. There's like nodes that do, there are like 10 nodes that do the same thing with just like tiny little parameters that are removed from each node. Or one has this set, one only has 4 of that set, one only has 3. It's a really complex program.
Incredible, yeah. Hopefully it doesn't become as complex as like the other day, like I've been comparing the fields attributes lately to, for example, how ice used to work in Softimage. And I prefer that workflow a lot more.
What workflow?
Basically, ice and the new fields attribute system of geometry nodes. Because you have 2 lines of logic. One is you have run, execute, or yeah, start, run, and then finish, which is the geometry lines. And then you have like the concept of fields, which is the data, get data, modify the data, and then set data. So ICE would have had a very minimized concept of that workflow when it comes to proceduralism, where you start your tree and finish your tree. The way they handled it was with an execute node, and that was it. Just run the tree, whatever's connected in it, in the order of the stack inside of that execute tree. And everything else was just like the field attributes, where you get data, modify the data, set data. And if you need to grab the data, then grab in another part of the tree, you could use these Wi-Fi nodes, or it would depend on the order of the stack that you have. So for example, the first geometry line that you would execute would set the geometry, and if you needed to get it again, then it would be in the next line of the tree of that stack. So Softimage Ice was super simple, really easy to be procedural. The only problem was kind of like Blender, the Ice system was separated from the actual platform of the drawing engine, the animation engine, and all that. So the geometry fields nodes is kind of brings me back to that concept of where things start, run, and execute through the geometry lines, and you get, modify, and set your data through the field lines. So that's kind of nice. So.
That sounds hella complicated. Like I haven't even used geometry nodes that much. I was looking at doing have you seen Aaron's tutorial on it?
The new which tutorial?
the YouTube ones, like this long 7-hour tutorial. With
14-hour
a
one?
workflow. Is it
Oh,
14 hours? Oh, I thought it was 7.
oh,
Oh,
I think maybe it's the short version of the 14-hour one, the one with the flowers, right?
yeah, I wanted to do something that like teach me everything in one go.
Cool. I
So
haven't watched
maybe
the
I'll
full
do
thing.
that one. But have you seen the stuff he's doing? It's just like that's all procedural.
Yeah, and that's great. But obviously, he's advocating to try and make it a bit easier in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that'll be actually be a game changer. Like just for what's this add-on? It's called G Scatter.
Yes.
It's on
Or
that
another
one.
one.
I use that all the time now. Like I
Yeah.
use that all the time.
And have you tried Bag of
I actually
Pie?
don't
Slink.
like G-Scatter. Hey.
Yeah. I knew you were going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Bag of Pie is a good
But
competitor.
Why?
let me show you.
Bag of Pie is
Wait.
like G-Scatter, but on steroids.
Not on steroids. On even more. on steroids and crack and G fuel and what other things they are. So let me show you the magic of Bugger Pie.
Alright guys, so I guess I'll close the stream here. Thanks for your time. I hope you guys had
Yeah.
fun.